Hello everyone, I'm Mark, Director of Middlesbrough Environment City, and thanks very much for the opportunity to come along today and talk about our new Climate Action Fund project here in Middlesbrough. And my presentation is about how we can take a whole system approach to engaging communities in tackling climate change. First of all, a little bit about us as an organisation, Middlesbrough Environment City. So we're a charity that promotes healthy and sustainable living across the Tees Valley using an approach called One Planet Living, and I'll mention a bit more about that in a moment. And the work that we do is very holistic, and it covers these 5 themes. So it's very much about how we can address the climate crisis and bring around positive change to people's lives. Through a combination of actions that might include things like energy efficiency, increasing cycling and walking, healthy diets and sustainable food, and also, of course, through education and awareness raising. I mentioned very briefly about One Planet Living, and my colleague Simon Blenkinsop from Middlesbrough Council, who's going to be introducing Middlesbrough's green strategy next, will say a bit more about it. But this is the approach that we use and have used for a number of years in Middlesbrough. It's called One Planet Living. It was developed by a charity called Bioregional. And the reason why it's called One Planet Living is that if everybody in the world lived the same lifestyles that we do here in the UK, we'd need 3 planets, and we've only got 1. And it's based around these 10 principles, which are kind of all the things that we need to think about to have more sustainable lifestyles. So some of them are very environmental, like zero carbon or zero waste, things that we think about when we think about perhaps sustainability. But actually at the other end of the scale, and in that top left-hand corner, you have things like health and happiness, culture and community, and all of the things, the societal things and the economic things that create sustainability alongside tackling the climate crisis directly and bringing down carbon emissions. One of the ideas I want to sort of bring in at this point is particularly relevant to us here on Teesside. For those of you in the workshop with Ori from Oberhausen, in many ways, something that they've got there as well that they're thinking about is this idea of a just transition. And that's that where we're working in disadvantaged communities, like the ones that we have in many parts of Teesside, is that we need to respect the fact that they are often lower carbon emitters, and that they're largely not responsible for, within the British context at least, many of the emissions that we have. But actually those who are often least responsible for the climate emergency, whether that's locally, nationally or globally, are often those who are most impacted by the climate crisis. So a little bit about our project. So this is Climate Action Middlesbrough. It's part of the National Lottery Community Fund's Climate Action Fund programme, which is a 10-year programme to engage local communities in action on tackling climate change. Our project is a 5-year initiative based here in Middlesbrough to create a community-led movement for positive change towards a sustainable environment. And that's very much about how we engage with our local communities, not only in practical action on climate change, but also in decision-making, and using something that I'll come to in a second called a whole system approach. And it's a partnership project, so MEC is the lead for it, but our other partners include the Wildlife Trust, who will be leading on a lot of the work around biodiversity and nature-based solutions, the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. 2 of our community partners that work particularly with young people, ACTES and Links, the other Perspective, who work with BME and asylum seeker and refugee communities, and also on a bigger scale, Middlesbrough Council and our largest social landlord here in Middlesbrough 13 group. And there's 2 strands to what we're going to be delivering on. One is how we engage with communities, and this is very much linked to the council's green strategy that Simon will be speaking about shortly. And that includes setting up a young people's climate forum and a community climate forum here in Middlesbrough to get people involved in the decision making about how we tackle the crisis, and also to challenge us all of us in organisations about the way in which we're doing that and the actions that we should be taking. And then also some practical action on a range of solutions, including nature recovery. So for the rest of my talk, really, I want to focus on this concept, this idea that we're using as part of the project, which is about a whole system approach. And reflecting back on the 2 days that we've had, you'll see this time and again coming out in different speakers' presentations. So what a whole system approach is a way of trying to achieve change at scale. And it recognizes that although everything that actually happens is done by individuals, how we're able to respond is determined by a whole layer of layers of an onion, really. So for example, when we're talking about individuals and how we can respond to the climate crisis, it can be very much about the actions that we can take, but also our ability to express opinion and make decisions. When you get into that next level of a social environment, it's about people's attitudes to climate change. What do you see on social media about climate change? Is it positive? Is it negative? But also things like, particularly when we're working with young people, around things like peer mentoring, how we can train young people to be advocates of climate change and influence their peers. Many of us here today are from organisations, and our response to it, because we are leaders of a system, we are leaders, within this system, many of the decisions that we make will influence others. So for example, are we taking positive policies and practices ourselves to adapt and mitigate for climate change? Are we using opportunities with beneficiaries, service users, people we come into contact with, suppliers, to influence their behaviour as well? The physical environment is something perhaps we think a lot about when we think about tackling climate change, because without it, we can't do some of those things. So, for example, the creation of cycle routes is an obvious one to increase the number of people cycling. Within the context of this conference, can we develop these nature recovery networks? One of the projects we're going to be doing with the Wildlife Trust is to develop a recovery strategy here in Middlesbrough. And how important are different habitats? We heard about this yesterday, different habitats for carbon sequestration. And outside that sits policy. And sometimes that can all seem very distant, doesn't it? So when we hear some national policy makers talking, it all seems a very long way away, perhaps from where we are and our ability to influence. But those policies are also at a local level. And Simon's going to speak in a couple of minutes about Middlesbrough Council's new green strategy. But as organisations, we have those policies as well. And that's very much within our gift to make those changes towards a more sustainable environment and tackling the climate crisis. So what have we done so far? Well, here in Middlesbrough, we've been working on climate action for many years, and many partners have been involved with that. And this new project through the Climate Action Fund is just a really exciting opportunity for us to build that work further and influence more people and engage more people, particularly in the decision making. I've already mentioned the green strategy, and Simon will say a little bit more on that. And what's particularly exciting is our food partnership here in Middlesbrough will be part of that delivery structure, bringing in lots of partners in to deliver the sustainable food part of the green strategy. And we are currently recruiting staff to the programme. In fact, we're currently recruiting for the coordinator. If you want that, if you're interested in that, you've got till Friday to get your application in. So what's going to happen next? So hopefully we'll actually have all the project staff in post soon. And then we can really get starting. It's very much about building on our existing partnerships, things like the food partnership, the affordable warmth partnership, our relationship with the Tees Valley Nature Partnership, setting up our climate forum so that people can really get involved in the implementation of the strategy. So thanks for that. I'm going to pass over now to my colleague, Simon Blenkinsop from Middlesbrough Council, who's going to talk more about Middlesbrough's green strategy. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Simon Blenkinsop from Middlesbrough Council. Some of you will know me, some of you perhaps don't know me. Worked with Middlesbrough Council for 12 years, early in the countryside team and then as an area care manager. My role now is to develop a green strategy and to help steer the green agenda for Middlesbrough. So we're just starting out on the path of developing our green strategy now. This is really a directive not just from government, but also from the Mayor, Andy Preston, who set out a statement for what our ambitions, and one of those ambitions is to become carbon net neutral as a council by 2029, and also as a town by 2039. So that's fairly ambitious programme, well ahead of the government's timescale. And we're looking out at setting this strategy for Middlesbrough to engage residents and businesses alike to look at our carbon impact and footprint and see what we need to do to address that and see if we can get down to net zero. As Mark's already mentioned, we're using the basis of One Planet Living principles, which the council had adopted some time ago. So we took the decision to retain this agenda, if you like. So it's not just about conservation as such, or it's a sustainability model that Bioregen coined, and it is about sustainable lifestyles, how to get people to lead their lives, but going beyond that, beyond carbon reduction and conservation, to enhance well-being and also building better communities and better businesses. So it's not just about a carbon reduction model. And the key certainly will be to involve communities and businesses and individuals. We can't do this alone. It has to be a town-wide agenda. It can't just be led by the council. We have a big role to take this forward and drive it, but also we need to engage with everybody to help to achieve our ambitions. And one of the key themes that we're looking at is about how we manage our green spaces, obviously relevant to this conference, what we do in terms of adding value, increasing biodiversity, and how we do this and what it's going to look like. The principle within One Planet Living, as you can see there, is land use and nature, as well as sustainable water. The value of green space has been well documented, I'm sure well discussed at this conference, and particularly more so today than the benefit of to health and also to mental health. So what we have to do is look to protect and develop and enhance what we have. Middlesbrough is a small borough with not a great deal of square hectareage or square area of land, and we don't have many green spaces. So what we have is valuable, and what we need to do is to look to protect and develop where possible. We need to look at the assets we have, how we assess those assets, benefit of those assets, you put capital value on those assets and where they fit in, and make sure we actually recognize these and steer them and drive them and enhance them wherever possible. Easier said than done. And what we need to do, as Mark's already alluded to, is look to see how we can work with partners, such as through the Community Action Fund, with the Wildlife Trust, with MEC, and look to seek funding to look at these assets and what we can do to enhance them and to improve the connectivity and obviously the recovery value where there are sites that are not necessarily managed well or looked after, and that's for a number of reasons, possibly mainly down to resource and lack of probably staff within the council, then to look at these and see what we can do to improve their value. These are protected sites and we need to do more to look after them. There is Middlesbrough, which roughly is around about 4 miles from the river to the south of Middlesbrough and Nunthorpe. So not a huge area. Some very valuable green spaces. If you look at our parks, open spaces, we have some green flag sites, 19 local wildlife sites, mainly based around the Beck corridors, and they can highlight these. Quite a number of these are local wildlife sites. But the important thing which I need to mention is the valuable work that our communities do to look after these sites. And we have 9 green space groups who work across the whole of Middlesbrough, looking after many of these sites and doing a superb job under the auspices of the Green Spaces Forum, which is chaired by Tees Valley Wildlife Trust and Sue Antrobus, who does a superb job trying to chiv us all together and looking after us and looking after the groups, and particularly through this difficult period, making sure that we're all continuing and surviving and doing the work that that needs to be done. So without those groups, certainly as a council, we would struggle. We have not got the resource to be able to look at that and be able to manage and look after them. These groups collectively are bringing in tens of thousands of pounds to actually enhance the site, enhance green spaces, attract residents, and to also benefit the biodiversity of these sites. But we also recognise we need to do more, and it's sites perhaps that are under the radar that we're not looking after, that we need to do more to look at that and seek funding to do that. So there's great opportunities. There's lots to be done, lots of engagement to be done. We need to look at where the expansion may be, where the development may be. There's also proposals already in the pipeline to develop new sites, one in Lower Ormsby Beck, for instance, but also possibly new local wildlife sites in our cemeteries and on roadside verges, all important habitats and worthy of protection, and expanding nature recovery networks of vital work that still needs to be done. In terms of next steps, in terms of the strategy for Middlesbrough, we're just about to go out to consultation on this to get residents' views, community views, and also those of business. So that will be going live next week. So we look forward to getting the views from people attending this forum and how input into that and steering our priorities. This stage, we're still at a draft strategy, and we need input into that to make sure we're on the right path and that residents are on board and supporting the work that we're doing and steering it forward, and hopefully playing the part to being involved in that process, if not directly, then through the Community Action Fund that Mark's talking about. Other things that's all taken place. With a blue-green infrastructure strategy, many of you perhaps been involved in that your bit in terms of consultation and being involved in workshops. That's an exciting bit of work being led by planners to deliver really valuable direct strategy to actually implement programs of work around our beck corridors and watercourses, and looking at valuable transport links and active travel. So there's some valuable work coming out of that. That document will be just in final stages, will be coming out shortly. I have mentioned about the new nature reserve coming on stream hopefully very soon, and looking at funding to help to see what we can do in managing our existing assets. The tree funding that we're doing at the moment, you saw perhaps briefly in the slides, we've planted over 1,500 trees. We've got another 5,000 community trees which will be given out shortly to community groups. So if you're interested, you can talk to the council, and we're giving trees away for community planting purposes. And then we need to work wider with our partners on a broader agenda to help deliver this green strategy on behalf of the council and the town and the residents, and to drive our ambitious targets forward. So I look forward to working with you all, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you.